Underground oceans, alternate histories, magnificent machines. These are the 10 best steampunk games on PC. Unlike our other lists on RPGs, roguelikes or simulators, steampunk isn't a genre as such. It encompasses a broad selection of varied games, linked by connective pipework that's more about feel than it is about content. So, at the risk of being rightly chastised by someone with excellent taste in goggles, let's look at some of the screws that fasten this list together. Many of these games take place in alternate histories containing elements of Neo-Victorian Britain or Wild West America. Worlds where technological advancement has stalled at the point of the first industrial revolution. There's a lot of steam, obviously, although it's not a requirement. Springs and clockwork are equally welcome here. And there's often a focus on aesthetically pleasing machinery and design. All of these games feature retro-futuristic inventions, mechanical innovation, and a focus on the Victorian spirit of adventure. Stoke those engines and breathe in the toxic fumes. Here, in no particular order, are the 10 best steampunk games you can play on PC.
He tells us what he deems wise.
Siberia is definitely more clock rather than steampunk, but this rich, story-led point-and-click adventure, which takes place in an unusual alternate reality, still falls firmly within the realms of Victoriana-inspired adventure. You control Kate Walker, an American lawyer sent to a French village on business. Because, as we all know, every magical adventure has to begin with someone doing something so dull you've fallen asleep as I've described it. But over the course of the game, she discovers wondrous lost civilizations and begins to question the direction her life has taken. And although it's a world full of mammoths and automatons and gentleman robots, it's a strangely human game containing a simple, sharply written story of self-discovery. It also spawned 2 sequels, the second of which arrived 15 years after the first game, but neither compare to the elegantly made and deftly scripted original. The first Amnesia game, The Dark Descent, is a horror masterpiece. And while the sequel might not reach the same heights of nerve-damaging terror, it's nevertheless an excellent example of steampunk horror done right. A dark, oily descent to nightmarish depths with the proverbial infernal machine juddering the very foundations of the building you explore. The events take place in London on New Year's Eve 1899, in a world full of mysterious engineers, twisted contraptions, and deformed, monstrous man-pigs. And since development duty shifted from frictional games to the Chinese room, it also means we get a scintillating musical score from Jessica Curry. It's a murky, captivating adventure that leaves one obvious, lingering question. What kind of a machine would a pig use anyway, and how would they manage the controls using trotters? These are the questions that keep me up at night. Double fine stacking is wonderful for an endless number of reasons. There's the satisfying Matryoshka mechanic of slotting other dolls around you, the bouncy but bleak presentation, and the "Cool blimey governor, we've all got mange" world of evil barons and plucky chimney sweeps. As little Charlie Blackmore, you have to inhabit the bodies of various other dolls, and honestly, it's less weird than it sounds as you journey across the world to find your missing family who've been enslaved by the aforementioned baron. And even though it looks all bright and cheerful, there are wonderfully dark Dickensian undertones with coal-shoveling urchins and capitalist monsters. The steampunk elements come from a succession of paddle boats, giant trains and doomed zeppelins that young Charlie uses to cross the globe and rescue his missing siblings. It's a short, atmospheric treat where you can stop and breathe in all the coal, steam and mild despair. Looking back, BioShock Infinite might not inspire the same degree of maniacal admiration it did when it was first released, but it's still an incredible journey through one of the most vivid, tangible locations in gaming. And it's the floating city of Columbia that warrants Infinite's inclusion on this list. It's the sort of place that should only exist in the wildest imaginations, and whatever technology is responsible for its blatant disregard for gravity, it certainly captures the spirit of adventure and derailed progression. It's a world that should be idyllic, but it's anything but. And unlike the original game's Rapture, it's amazing to see Columbia as a living, functioning city. The bludgeoning fights might obscure some of the game's environmental beauty, but in terms of design, there's very little to compare to it. It's cohesive without ever being boring, and every enemy feels like the product of the American dream turned into a nightmare.
Only in our fair city will you see such amazing feats of technological prowess!
We featured a few nasty robots so far, Oscar from Siberia aside, so it's time we celebrated a much more adorable automaton. Say hello to Joseph, the robot hero of Machinarium, who's on a mission to escape the scrapyard he's been chucked into and to rescue his similarly adorable girlfriend Berta, who, it transpires, has been kidnapped by evil robots because yes, there are still evil robots here as well. Machinarium is an achingly beautiful game packed with cunning puzzles, which takes place in the sort of gorgeous, handcrafted world that only Amanita Design seem to be able to create. It manages to make old, rusty things seem beautiful, and there's a utilitarian elegance to the way everything works. As well as a beautiful soundtrack, all the communication takes place via comic bubbles and animations, so it's perfect for anyone who wants a story without lengthy dialogue. In short, Machinarium is like a perfect steampunk storybook. At the risk of sounding like a cartoon Dickensian villain, many of the games featured on this list so far have had an Anglo-centric Victorian vibe, but Steamworld Dig redresses the balance brilliantly. It's another game with adorable robots, but this time the setting recalls the American West. This time you're in control of Dorothy on the hunt for the first game's protagonist, Rusty. It still has the deliciously compelling resource loop of the first game as you venture underground again and again in search of glory and precious loot. There are hidden traps, concealed riches, and hordes of dangerous enemies, all lining the twisted, compelling paths that change every time you play. And every journey below affords you the opportunity to upgrade your gear and delve deeper, taking on the sterner challenges that reside in the deeper places of this alternate take on the Old West. Sunless Sea from the creators of Fallen London sounds, at first, like a classic slice of Victorian adventure. Take to the ocean in your steamship, head into the unknown, cannibalise your crew before the giant crabs or sentient icebergs kill them. Alright then, maybe not that last bit. Sunless Sea is the sort of steampunk adventure that's not about if you're going to survive, but how you're going to die. It's a voyage of discovery, loneliness and inevitable failure. And all that really matters is whether or not your life story is bleak enough to be told in seedy dockside taverns by similarly doomed mariners. With this many tales to be told, Sunless Sea is a text-heavy adventure with over 350,000 words of terrifying tales just waiting to be told. Whether you're defying ocean gods or watching your crew lose their grip on their sanity, Sunless Sea is a dense, unusual, gloriously gloomy experience. Now, the name might suggest this is the wrong type of punk for this list, but let's be honest, Frostpunk is a perfect fit. You've got whirring machinery, a bleak setting, and filthy Victorian engineers in a battle for survival. It's also brilliant and a little bit different, which are both great reasons to include it here. It's a city building and management game that can go wrong in fascinating ways, where every decision, no matter how nobly made, can come back to bite you in the frozen posterior. It's set in an alternate 1886 where volcanic eruptions have led to a worldwide winter, and humanity survives by building generators in the coal-rich north. Few games make you feel so guilty about sending your little workers trudging out through the waist-deep slow, but you know that if you don't, you're all going to die. It's a flinty, uncompromising portrayal of a steampunky world that's perfect for anyone searching for a bit of shiver-inducing Victoriana.
Workday ends.
For a steampunk list, we've had a precious lack of gravity-defying aerial vehicles. Airships conquer the skies, as you may have guessed from the name, go some way to rectifying that problem. It's a real-time strategy game in which you construct giant aerial vehicles by bolting together various modules, structures, weapons and resources, leading to a Lego-like feel of endless creativity. Once you've made your choices, you take your fleet to the skies to battle against similar constructions, either online against human opponents or in the single-player strategic mode. It's a gloriously detailed game with skyborne sailors scurrying around your ships, carrying out the essential tasks needed to keep your creations airborne. And the tactical and design choices will have you tinkering with your precious machines like a wild-eyed engineer you always wished you were. I honestly can't do a better job of selling Arcanum than the Steam page, so I'm not even going to try. This fantasy come steampunk RPG is the sort of adventure where you're equally likely to wield a flaming sword as you are a flintlock pistol. It's a game full of huge industrial cities crammed with orcs, elves and other fantasy creatures. But this isn't just a dry, superficial RPG. The world adapts and molds itself around your character, and the open, point-based attribute system feels like a step away from the more simplistic character development and leveling you usually see in similar games. It's also absurdly huge. It would take over 30 real-time hours to traverse the land of Arcanum, and the world is populated with over 300 unique characters. All this means that Arcanum is the classic RPG that most people haven't played, one that deserves to be talked about in the same breath as Baldur's Gate or Neverwinter Nights, which takes place in a world that sets it truly apart. And we've reached the end of our journey. The pipes have seized up, we're all out of fuel, and my top hat needs taking to the haberdashery. Let us know what your favourite steampunk settings in games are, hit the like button if you love the smell of burning coal, and subscribe to the channel for more top 10 videos. And if you are already subscribed, please remember to hit that notification bell so you know when our next video gets into the station.